one of the benefits of living in Miller. I can walk to work.
Yeah, I'm a little tight with the wife and I and the kids, but, yeah, think about you.
Yeah. We don't have a big enough vehicle.
Neither do we.
We don't have a big enough vehicle for car, I saw on the street.
But, you know, and you're saying 60, I'm pushing mid-70s, not quite there yet. But I thought of my dad one time before he passed. He said, you know, Tom, we all these years we accumulated, and now it gets to the point you got to get rid of.
Yeah. Well, they don't put trailer hitches in the back of hearses.
No.
And when I was in graduate school the first time, it was sitting in a mandatory symposium. They call it a symposium. All the graduate students had to come to. This kid, he was graduating in a couple of months, and he was out in job interviews, and he showed up in a beautiful suit. And several people commented on how nice he looked in his suit, and somebody asked him where he got it. He said, "Well, I got a deal on it. I only spent $50. Now, granted, this was $1987, but you're not going to buy much of a suit for $50 in 1987. And he said, I got it at the funeral home.
No.
And he said, the only problem with it is it doesn't have any pockets. So there's an object lesson on how important material possessions are.
Yes, no, I was just.
That's why we just put more towards savings so the kids
We
can have
decided
it.
to bring people like into the
Don't get rid of
process.
it.
I just
I know
wanted
they
to
will.
do that at the courts in the
But you know what, it might give them a little bit of
And the other ones
the
that
pain
were
a little
left
bit,
are
you know? Help get them set up.
Yours turning yellow.
That's why we're short.
Is it?
I had one,
Okay.
I had one.
Sue might be just a little late, she's at a church council meeting minute, she's gonna buzz out of it, so.
Well, I was reminded I had a meeting tonight too at 7 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you do, right here.
Yeah, I found another one.
Yeah.
They kind of add up, don't they?
You know what, that's okay.
That's
Yes,
good.
that's
No,
okay.
that's okay.
Nice evening.
If there's some
Couple
reason
weeks.
I have to.
The heat's coming.
Yeah.
I know I went golf with you all yesterday, man, that was nice.
So
Well,
now
that's
it's
not
me.
bad.
Oh,
After them
Or just
2
like-
weeks,
yeah, now that roof that's coming back.
I'm gonna try
I
something
don't think it
different.
should be quite as bad.
I can't ever hear over here what's happening, so I'm
Well,
gonna
yeah,
try.
we gotta have everybody come up to the mic. I noticed, I listened to last week's meeting, and when people are talking back there, you can't hear them very, very
Don't
loud.
worry.
Well, and people watching home, they can't hear us. It's
Yeah,
just-
I mean, you can hear everybody that's around the mic, that's great.
Well, Jan, with your phone call, I was gonna tell everybody to make sure the mic's on and come up to the mic.
They start talking, say, nope, come up to the mic.
Yeah, cause anytime your glass starts on, at least turn it on and leave it on, right?
All right.
It's green, I don't know what that means. Can see from here it's green. This afternoon, trying to figure out the.
You get this mic, come down to the track and fix mine. We still don't have it figured out yet. So, somebody vandalized us.
Oh, no.
It's happening a lot right now. Cut all the wires on the back of the speakers,
Bummer.
and they had to crawl up on the fence to do it.
Why would they do that?
I don't
That
understand.
just doesn't make any sense.
I
Would
I
think-
tested a lot of fence
What's the
when I was
point of
hunting to make sure it was still alive. You might-
I have to let them-
You know what? I did one time, and it was inadvertent, and it was dark, and it may have been having some adult beverages. So you can imagine where that went, how I tested it. That was not a pleasant experience.
The guy that
And it was
writes,
hot, I'm promising.
the guy that writes my press releases wanted to know, put it in there for a reward. I said, yeah, put in there $500 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction, and $700 if they call me and not the police.
Perfect.
That'd work.
Well, I think about every 4 to 5 years, every place produces a group of kids that are just bound and determined to collect their misdemeanor convictions before they
Yeah.
graduate from high
don't think
It's
this,
just what they do.
I really don't think this was kids though. I think it was, I have my suspect, but he shall remain anonymous.
An angry racer.
No, just an angry dopehead.
She made it, look at that.
Perfect.
He left without you, huh?
You say a quick amen before you left?
Yes, I did.
Good job.
For me too?
For everybody.
I'm still praying for you, Mike.
I'll take every one of them.
Got my other hat on.
Yes, please.
Let us pray. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for the gift of salvation. And Father, thank you for the time that you have given us. Let us make the most of it. Father, I lift up the city council tonight as they engage in the business of the city. Father, I pray that you would give each one of them wisdom and insight as they discharge their duties and make decisions. Father, I lift up the city employees. Father, as they go through this year's construction season, I pray that you keep them safe. Father, I pray that we would go through this summer with no serious accidents. And Father, I pray that the people that are working out on the roads, that you would keep them vigilant, and you would keep each of us vigilant, and all the people that pass through this town vigilant as we drive past. Father, I pray that you would give the department heads wisdom and insight as they discharge their duties and the city employees. Father, let everything that is done tonight glorify your Son's name, and in his name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, call the meeting to order, begin with the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm not gonna tell you how many years it's been, but I still feel like God bless America right after we said the pledge of allegiance. Okay, entertain a motion to look over the special council meeting with regard to the insurance proposals. So I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. I'll second it.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Any public input?
I do. After listening to last week's meeting, there was some confusion about what was talked about as far as meetings, like this meeting.
Yep.
So I'd like to share with you an email conversation Shayla and I had. I emailed her and asked her to reach out to SDPAA and see if they would like to present their insurance package to the Finance Committee. Also, I have a group text to the committee members to see what dates may be off the table for us to hear their proposal. Shayla responded, yes, I can. They know that a committee cannot make any decisions, so they plan to visit with the entire council. It has been a few years since they have been here, so they want to touch base anyway. They also don't plan to take a long time for their quote. However, they did say that they will make both a committee meeting and a council meeting if necessary. One comes from Wagner, the other from the Sioux Falls area. Personally, I think it's a waste of $200 committee payment and time for them to present the same thing 2 times. Let me know what the committee thinks. I responded, I'm good either way, to be honest. Trying to be fair, we talked about having them present to the committee first, like Joe and his insurance company did, and then have both parties present for the council meeting. That way they have equal time and representation. If they wanted to forego the committee, I would not have any problem with that. Tom, what do you think? Because this was a group email.
Yep.
And then but there was no other response, and then Shayla asked if can I put Joe on the agenda for the 5th? I said, I'll not be at the June 5th meeting. I will be in Florida with the kiddos. And she said, when's Joe planning to present to the council? And then Florida sounds a lot more fun than a council meeting, which is a fact. And then I said, maybe we could do a meeting the 12th just for the insurance. And then Shayla said she was gonna add it to the agenda to set up a special meeting for insurance, if that is okay with Tom. So it was all discussed, you know, and it was laid out. And I feel like last week it was made to sound like I didn't talk to anybody. and nothing was represented with it, which I think is false. So I wanted to clarify that per emails we sent.
Okay,
So I just want to put that out there.
okay, and, we did, reach out and, the parties indicated that this would be the, best situation. We did have a meeting with Joe and Steve and another gentleman. Okay, yeah, and, we had that, so they gave their presentation, so.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, because that was right after the presentation.
Yep.
Is when that email chain went to make sure your group had a fair shot to present to the committee first. Yep.
Okay, all right. Now, with that said, Joe and Steve, do you want to give a summation of or do you want to hand out the additional information to the council members the remainder of the council members that you submitted to us? And I know I had a series of questions that I asked and you guys answered, and if we can go over something of that sort, so I'm open to whatever you would like to, present to the entire council as far as the summation of what you presented to the committee.
Yeah, so
You wanna come up? Yeah.
however you guys want us to do it, you asked us to present to the finance committee, which we did present our proposal, and then last week at the meeting, you said you wanted us to be here to answer questions and then hear the other proposal, so I guess whatever you guys want, if you want us to go through our 2.5 hour proposal again, we're prepared to do that if that's what you wish, or if you wanna hear their proposal and then have a Q&A, whatever you folks would like to do.
What was talked about at the last meeting was gonna be separate, or are we doing this together, or what?
I don't know if there's any, we can do it together. I mean, they're both proposals are here. I mean, that's what I'm looking at, I guess.
I think what was discussed is that the entire proposal wasn't necessary because we could go off of what the finance committee discussed, but
Recommendation is what I.
if we had questions that come out of that, we could address the questions. We don't wanna shut down any proposal that you want to do, so if you want to do something that is not being done, let us know. We're giving you an agenda line item, so if there's something that you want to see in that line item, let us know so we can get that accomplished. I'd be interested in, if you had some more pamphlets, I'd like
Yep.
to have that in front of me.
You wanna,
Are we gonna have be able to have kind of questions?
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you want? if
I
you
would
could-
like to hear the other proposal first and then we can ask questions of both,
Okay.
kind of compare is what I'd like to do.
All right, the only thing is, there's three of us that heard the other proposal and three who haven't heard the other proposal with regard to,
I think that's where we're just gonna have to trust the finance committee, the way they're established, where they're gonna help bring up some of them questions. And I was not a part of the finance committee, so kind of go off, help with them of guiding the rest of the council into what the questions need to be asked.
Jen,
Who is on the finance committee? So I know who's, Will, Mike.
okay? So what would you like?
It's up to you.
Well, would you hand out, you wanna hand out the proposal to the other council members and stuff of that?
Sure.
And then we can let
Yeah.
them present and we can,
you got yours?
I have mine.
You
Got mine?
Thank you.
got yours? Okay.
I've got mine.
May I have one to give to our attorney too? Thank you.
Everybody has.
Yep. Do we wanna go over anything with regard to what was presented to get an idea? Or do we wanna just go in with the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance?
let's just jump in with them.
Okay, all right.
I agree.
All right.
More paperwork.
Well, this is fun paperwork though.
Good.
Right. So I'm also gonna leave you with, yours. Yours.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shayla a PowerPoint to kind of guide us through the kind of the overview of the risk pool, but you have that in print in the left side of your packet. So we'll just kind of go through this. I'll try to make it fairly quick and painless. So my name's Lynn Brenn. I am the Executive Director of the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance. A little bit of history about me. So I actually worked claims for the risk pool for about 17 years for our claims administrator before I came on board with the risk sharing pool in 2017. So I've got 17 years of claims history, and then coming over here, I worked on writing the coverage documents and stuff like that. Came over as a member services representative, and then was promoted to deputy director, and most recently the executive director of the pool. So I am currently your kind of go-to for any changes that you need. I've worked with Shayla several times on anything that the city needs. So you've got, I think, a pretty solid liaison as far as if you have any claims, questions, concerns, coverage issues. I've got some pretty intimate knowledge of the coverage document because, again, I helped write that document for the risk sharing pool. So a little bit of history about the pool. So in 1986, the commercial insurance market was hardening. The commercial carriers were unwilling or unable to provide coverage for public entities, not just in South Dakota. This was a nationwide crisis. So our legislature in 1986 created the enabling statutes, and the risk sharing pools were born. South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance started in 1987. We had 7 entities, and we only offered liability coverage for the first few years. Shortly after that, we added property coverage. Today, we have over 450 local governments, about 85% of those local governments across South Dakota. So the philosophy of the risk pool is we're very proactive rather than reactive. We will demonstrate that by giving you some examples of our loss control and risk management solutions that we have created just through our experience dealing with public entities across South Dakota. We are financially secure. Every year, the pool goes through some rigorous financial and actuarial audits, and then we use that information to create rates that we then use to determine how much funding is needed to not only support the programs that you guys enjoy as while being members of the risk sharing pools, but also to make sure that we are able to pay and administer those claims. Similarly to how the city protects its assets by purchasing coverage, the SDPAA purchases reinsurance to help make sure that we are able to maintain that financial stability. So I know there may have been some conversations about, you know, we have so many public entities within South Dakota. What happens if we have, say, a derecho event like we did last year? We have reinsurance, and we have actuarial people who help. They look at our history, they look at the trends, they kind of look at what's happening, and they help us determine what funding we need and where we need to be. So through purchasing risk sharing or reinsurance, we are able to make sure that we are able to fund appropriately so that we're not going to have any financial stresses. Our board of directors sees the financials every month, and those are posted just before our board meetings. So at our board meetings, we have a full review of our financial information. So, and our audited financials are on our website. You can go out and you can see last year's audited financials, and that information is there historically. So you can see our growth, and you can feel comfortable about your membership with the risk sharing pool. Okay, we are governed by a board of directors. It is 11-seat board, 7 municipal positions. So 7 of our board members come from cities and similar in size to Miller, also large cities, small cities, and then also the executive director for the league holds a permanent place on that board. So you are always going to have at least 1, but actually always 7, as that is currently set up. I have those highlighted so you can see who your representatives are on the city side, and then we have those 4 county representatives as well. If you look on a map, your representation covers the whole state, right? So we don't have just people from Sioux Falls, just East River, just West River. It's across the board as far as coverage and representation. Your service team comes from South Dakota. So your loss control surveys are conducted by Safety Benefits. They come out of Plankington. Claims Associates does your claims, so they will come. For this group, they will come out of Sioux Falls, but if they need some backup, they also have an office in Rapid City. Those claims adjusters live in those areas, so they are able to get out. I know last year when the derecho was happening, I was in my car driving and I had them calling me like, "Are you seeing this?" I'm like, "I'm seeing it from my car. I really am." Like, yes, get ready because we're going to have some claims. We're going to keep you guys busy. And we did. The May 12th and the June 6th storms were pretty aggressive. That June storm was actually a little bit larger in dollars and cents, even though we had less people, less entities involved. So it's been very interesting to watch that develop. Thankfully, our claims staff got right out there, familiar with some of the struggles that our local entities have, you know, being some more remote. Sometimes it's not as easy to get materials, so we're working with contractors and what have you. And then the risk pool itself, our main office is based in Fort Pierre, so any correspondence that you mail will go to Fort Pierre. But staff comes out of Harrisburg, Sioux Falls, Wagner, and Spearfish. So we're always around the state, we're across the state, we're watching what's going on. We're in touch with those locals almost on a daily basis. So our internal team, again, Lynn Bren, I'm your executive director, kind of your go-to. Christina Peterson is our deputy director. She comes out of Sioux Falls, and she has a lot of underwriting experience, so she's got a lot of financial background. Becky Brenzing is here with me tonight. She's one of our member services representatives, so you absolutely can contact her at any time as well. Jerry Kronbach, he actually was a mayor, and he served on our league board. I see you're kind of shaking your head.
I know him from
Yes,
Spearfish. Yeah.
okay. So Jerry is our member services representative as well, and then Petra Nichols is another underwriter. So these people, they have decades of public service to offer you at any time. Their contact information is out on our website. Our cell phone numbers are there. Those are our direct numbers. The only time you probably won't reach someone is if they are having some family time or if they're on the call with another member. And then we'll talk about the benefits of the risk-sharing pool. So we have loss control surveys, and the purpose of those loss control surveys are twofold. First of all, we talked about the risk pool being very proactive. So through those loss control surveys, we're going to identify areas of risk, right? Things that the city maybe needs some help with. And then we're going to give you some tools to help create or mitigate methods to take care of those risks. So we kind of help you control your own destiny as far as what types of risks you're looking to avoid, maybe mitigate. And at the end of the day, that actually does help us, because if we've got you in a safer position, it's also going to help us resolve those claims, whether defend or resolve whichever is most appropriate given the situation. Your last loss control survey was done in 2021, so you will get another survey in 2024. And then you gain your loss control credits. At the bottom of that slide, it talks about credits. So you receive loss control credits. You qualify for those every third year. Well, technically 4, because you qualify and then they are good for 3 years. Safety Benefits gives you a report, and they give you recommendations that maybe you need to follow up with. And you are currently getting your loss control credit, and that tells me that you take those loss control recommendations seriously, and then you've qualified for those credits. The goal is not to make it difficult for you to qualify for those credits. So if there's something that ever comes across and you're like, there's no way we can do this, we just want you to call us so we can work out a plan and figure out how that works and what we need to do. Property surveys are the Assurance Alliance's way to make sure that your property values are appropriate. So previously, it was every 4 years, Safety Benefits would come out and they would evaluate all of the structures that are covered by the SDPA, and then also identify structures that the city owns and do not do anything with. They're either not covered or they're not excluded. So then we need to be intentional, make a choice. Do we want to cover them? Do we not want to cover them? How do we want to address that? And then we right size values at that time. And so then I will come up and talk with Shayla, and we'll go through what the values are, what changes need to be made. The whole council can be involved at that. We are changing our surveys used to be every 4 years. We're going to every 5 years. So your next survey is slated for 2027 presently. And then property surveys don't tie you to any credits, but what it does do is it alleviates the problem for you of coming up with your own values, because we do that. Right, so as long as when we do property surveys, you agree to the values that we've established and the underwriting guidelines that are put forth, then you have access to the blanket limit, and you'll see that on your schedule. We'll talk about schedules in just a couple minutes.
Not to interrupt, when was the
yes.
last time did we have a schedule?
The last survey you had was in 2019, and I think we actually, so it came to us, it was kind of through COVID, So we got your book late. So we actually, I think, updated your values in late 2020, if not early 2021, just because COVID got weird. So the survey happened, then we didn't get any information for a long time because everybody was hunkered down. So it was a little delayed, so that time gap is gonna seem like a lot, but when we actually go back through in the system and see when your values were adjusted, it takes care of that. And in between that time, every year, underwriting does automatically do an inflation guard. So your property values will increase to try to keep up with inflation. So it's not like you're gonna have this huge jump, or you're gonna find yourself drastically undercovered
That was
if we
gonna be
have a
my
large.
next question.
Yep. So we've got that. We've got that kind of built into the renewal process and stuff like that. We have two hotlines that I feel are invaluable. They are the Employment Practices Hotline and the Government Practices Hotline. You have brochures about those benefits in your packets. The Employment Practices Hotline was developed to offer assistance to our public entities because while city attorneys are fantastic, not every city attorney can be an expert at every topic. So we have panel counsel that we have partnered with that are experts in employment law. And so what the brochure says, and there's a reference to it later, is if you have a decision that you need to make that's employment related, say you have a hiring decision, firing, termination, disciplinary action, anything like that, it's even overtime, FMLA, pretty much anything employment related, you can call the hotline and we will hook you up with panel counsel and they will give you some advice. They'll work through with you, okay, what statutes say, what your personnel policies say, have you created any extra duties that aren't already there by statute, just to make sure we get through that process correctly. And then if a claim arises out of that employment-related situation, then your deductible is waived. Otherwise, you might have a $5,000 employment-related deductible. We have had lots of success with that. While we haven't necessarily seen claim numbers go down, we've seen the cost of claims go down because we're already in a better position. We know that you guys have done it the right way. We've talked through it. We've avoided some claims in some situations, but just making sure you're starting out on the right foot makes those claims a lot more defensible. And it's not just about dollars and cents, because if you've ever been involved in any type of claim, much less an employment-related claim, it takes your time, and that is almost more costly than sometimes those dollars and cents at the end of the day. Government Practices Hotline, the most recent example, and I hate talking about COVID because everybody talks about COVID, but COVID hit and the whole world shut down suddenly, but we still were obligated to do elections and we had employees that we needed to take care of. So we were able to use that Government Practices Hotline and the Employment Practices Hotline to issue advice on how to handle COVID. How do you handle elections? How do you handle access to public locations and public buildings in the midst of this pandemic? How do we protect our employees? So we pushed out about 12 different informational news blasts giving advice and assistance to members how to handle COVID, how to get through COVID. And then shortly after we kind of figured out COVID, then we got marijuana. So then we also were able to kind of take care of that, issue some advice and help on that as well. We have member services visits. Those are conducted, we try to get to everybody annually. Those are just kind of sit downs with Shayla, or we reach out, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? Because not everybody needs a full-on review every year of what their coverages are. But mostly it's just touching base. But we also see a lot of our members, because we go to a lot of those SDML sponsored events. We're also at all the county events, training and stuff like that. So we present quite often. So we are there to help. If you have questions at any time, that's what those visits are for. But then also at those events that we participate in, you'll see us there. You do have your law enforcement coverage through us. So we have a specific training module called LLRMI. And what it does is it creates policies and procedures for our law enforcement folks that are tailored specifically to South Dakota based on trends and jurisdictions, state law. And those are updated every time the legislature makes a decision, changes something in statute, or if there's a new trend happening. So that's one of the benefits of living in the middle of the country. We get to see stuff happening on those outliers, and we've got some time to kind of respond to those trends, create some of those loss control resources, and get those back out to you. So we have that, and then we also have jail training that's offered through Safety Benefits. You guys have access to all of our online training through NeoGov and through Aurora Pictures. So all of that is always available to you, and we encourage you to take advantage of that.
Just
And
a
then,
question.
oh yes.
Yeah, online training, I I know we do some, how much do we do usually during the course of a year? You know, depends. Okay.
I was gonna say, we go
Amount of time you
to a
have.
lot of
Last year we.
in-person trainings, don't you?
What's that?
You go to a lot of in-person trainings.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's, yes, absolutely. No, and interrupt me anytime because I can talk for as long as you need me to on this. This is kind of my jam. So, and we do have that live training that is offered through Safety Benefits. In the beginning of the year, they focus a lot on the MSHA recertification training and stuff like that. So we see a lot of our members attending that and taking advantage of that. All of that is tied to your credits. We've got 4 credits that you guys qualify for. You have a renewal credit, which is just getting your packet turned in on time. You have a loss control credit, which we talked about responding to those survey recommendations. You have a loss ratio credit. That loss ratio credit means that you have a 60% or less loss ratio with the pool, meaning your claims dollars and your contribution dollars ratio is 60% or less. And then you get the law enforcement credit, which means that your law enforcement folks have agreed to train on our 12 model policies, adopt and train on those policies. And those are determined by LLRMI as best practices for your law enforcement agency.
How much are those credits?
So I think you've got the thing. So this year on this invoice, your credits total $4,482.26.
One more time, I'm sorry.
4,482.26.
Yes,
That's a
4482
number.
and 26 cents. And those credits are based on a formula that our underwriters put together, but our board of directors takes a look at where our financial package and program is every year, and they allocate a certain amount of credits to be distributed to qualifying members every year. So that happens in October. And if you're ever curious about what that process looks like, our October meeting is during the SDML convention, and that is when we talk about a lot of this stuff. We talk about what our rates will be for the upcoming year and stuff like that. So we would absolutely encourage you guys to come and come to the league conference because it's a fantastic opportunity, but then you can really see kind of what goes on, not really behind the scenes, but that's where we, again, approve those rates and stuff like that. All right, and then the next slide, we're almost to the end. So our property program, something I want to point out, we do not have a co-insurance provision, and basically co-insurance is just the commercial market's way of making sure that you guys have appropriate values in place. We don't have co-insurance. Instead, we take it on ourselves to right-size property values. That's our solution to that. A lot of those commercial policies do a great job of explaining what co-insurance does, and they'll give you an example in the document so that you never have a question of, okay, if I only have this, what does it look like? So you can take a look at co-insurance provisions if that's the avenue that you choose to take. We also do not have a cosmetic damage exclusion. So our coverage document says it's physical damage to covered property. So it might not look as pretty, but it's not functionally damaged. We don't have an exclusion for that. We will work with you. If you say, hey, I have a metal roof and it's totaled because it cannot be repaired, then we will work with you on that damage to that covered or to that metal roof. Many commercial policies that we're seeing do have cosmetic damage exclusions. Valuations, we talked about those. Deductibles, so currently the SCPA does not have a wind hail deductible. We've talked about it for several years, and our board does not see the value in applying a separate wind hail deductible. Currently, the city has a $500 deductible. So in, for example, the derecho, if you had every single one of your locations damaged, it's one $500 deductible that would apply. There's no separate wind hail deductible. For liability coverages, we have various deductibles. Your limit is your limit. Whatever you choose, that's your limit, your per occurrence limit. We don't stack policies. We don't separate out policies. Governmental liability covers all of your liability. Your general liability, your public officials liability, your law enforcement liability, they're under one policy. And the reason we've done that is to avoid any gaps in coverage and to simplify things. Coverage does not need to be complicated, right? You need to understand what's covered. Our adjusters need to have an easier time of saying, okay, this is covered. It says so right here. There's no exclusions. It's great. We do not have aggregate limits. So while we don't want you to have as many per occurrence claims as you need, you can. So if you have a $2 million per occurrence limit right now, if you have 5 $2 million claims, Safety Benefits is probably going to come out to talk to you about what we need to do to kind of shape things back up, but there's no limit to that, right? In aggregate, what that does is it says, okay, we're only going to pay X much dollars in one policy term. So if we did an aggregate and say it was a $2 million per occurrence with a $4 million aggregate, you would only have $4 million paid out in any one coverage term. And that's not necessarily two $2 million claims, because every payment that's made erodes that aggregate. So it's just something to be aware of. We have some aggregates in our cyber coverage, which is a standalone coverage, and you guys do have cyber coverage built into your liability line, but that's the only place that you'll really see that aggregate in your SDPA program.
What is our liability line? Amount now? What are we insured for?
You have $2 million per occurrence on your liability coverage. And per occurrence limits are something that are developed. You have to take a look at what the activities are within your community and what your exposures are, and then talk with your city attorney about what defenses might be available to you for those types of risks. And then that's kind of your appetite for risk, and then that's what we would do. When we do member service visits, we can take a look at what similarly situated communities do, and then you can kind of compare to that. We will never tell you, yes, this is what you absolutely need, or no, you shouldn't have this. We can offer some advice and kind of show you what others do. But yeah, at the end of the day, we encourage you to just work through the city attorney and really evaluate what your appetite for risk is, what your limits are, what they need to be. $2 million honestly is probably about right. It's similar to other entities in your size group as far as population and what activities happen and stuff like that.
What would it cost to go to 5?
I could get you a quote for that. I'm not the numbers gal. That's what I've got Christina and Petra for. If you want a $5 million quote, we can run that. Yep.
It doesn't take long nowadays to go through $2 million in a claim.
Potentially, no. Nope.
That might be 2 weeks in a hospital.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a question also on the auto. What is your, is it 50, 100,000?
So the uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage, that is coverage that stands in the place of a person who is at fault for an accident. Underinsured and uninsured motorists only applies to bodily injury. So if you have an employee who is out and they are on city business and you're already providing workers' compensation coverage for them, possibly some health insurance coverage. But if somebody injures them in an auto accident and they either don't have insurance coverage or they don't have enough insurance coverage, then that comes in and helps pay for that bodily injury claim.
What about one of our employees is driving one of our vehicles
Okay?
and runs somebody off the road.
Yes.
What is our limit on that?
That's a $2 million limit. That's a $2 million per
So that
occurrence.
would kick in on that.
Yep. Yes. Yes, sir.
Because a lot of your strictly auto policy, it's like 250, 500 or
Yes. Yep.
100, 250.
Yeah, those are very common limits that you'll see like on a personal lines policy and stuff like that. Nope, the city has chosen a $2 million limit for your
Yeah.
auto liability.
You run one truck off the road with a bunch of Chevy pickups on it, you'll spend $500,000 pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah. If you can find a truckload of Chevy pickups, you.
Well, that's why they're high priced.
Yes, exactly.
That only covers, the uninsured motorist only covers bodily injury?
It's not
Correct.
property.
Nope. Uninsured, underinsured motorist does not ever cover property damage. It's a bodily injury. It's a personal injury coverage. No carrier's going
Then
to.
your own collision would kick in and cover it.
Right. So if you're like for your auto physical damage, so if say I'm a city employee and I'm driving a city vehicle and someone T-bones me at an intersection and drives away. So now we have an unknown driver. So I have an uninsured driver who has caused injury and damage to me. So I would have my workers' compensation claim that I would be able, because I'm working at the time. And then I would have access to the uninsured, underinsured motorist for my injury. And then your auto physical damage would be whatever the schedule is. So I assume it's probably actual cash value. I think you've got one vehicle as stated value on your schedule, and then possibly one at replacement cost, one or two at replacement cost. But yeah, then that auto physical damage coverage would pick up there.
The other thing that caught my eye, summary of major exclusions, airports.
We do have some members who have airports, and if you have an airport, then we add it back on. Yep, that's just, it's a general packet form.
Okay,
So, yep,
so we would be covered?
yes. Yep, we have a separate fee for your airport exposures and stuff like that. Generally, not everybody in the state has an airport, and so because it's a little bit different than the norm, it doesn't fit into a normal schedule of coverages. So we do add it back on for those members who have it. So yes,
Okay.
you have airport coverages because we've added it back on for you. Okay, good. All right, and then we'll talk about some solutions for those real exposures. So I kind of talked a little bit about how living in South Dakota in the middle of the country, we have access to watching what happens kind of on those outliers and works their way in. So for cyber was really a big deal for a couple years when everybody was sitting at home working remotely, gave lots of people lots of time to figure out what they wanted to do and whose accounts they wanted to hack. So Project Boundary Fence is run through Dakota State University. Basically, it is a penetration testing program. It was actually available before we caught wind of it. We just really pushed it out to our members. We were excited to offer that opportunity. It's free of charge. What it does is it tells you what vulnerabilities you have and then offers recommendations on how to take care of those vulnerabilities. Through 2022, we offered a rebate program for members who participated in that program. All you had to do was sign up and you got a rebate, and then there were a couple other things that you could do. And I think you guys got at least some of those tiers, some of that rebate credit back. LLRMI, we do jail training in addition to those LLRMI policies and programs. We are looking at DART simulators. So what DART simulators are, they're actually really cool. Especially if any of you have kids who are gamers, it's like virtual reality for law enforcement officers for training. So we are looking at purchasing some of those. We're looking at some grants that might be available. And then those will be positioned strategically throughout the state so that all of our members have some pretty simple access to those. And then we're looking at some bystander training. It's called ABLE. We are looking at partnering with the City of Sioux Falls and Safety Benefits to get some of that training out to kind of help in those crazy, weird, high-intensity situations, just getting some additional training out there. And then again, employment practices, government practices, hotlines, and then we also talk about elections a lot through our hotlines, especially in those presidential campaign election years. We've had a lot of recalls lately, so our elections hotline has been pretty hot with that too. So any questions about elections, our people are happy to help with that. So just in closing, I just want you to understand and realize that, first of all, the SDPA we are endorsed and sponsored by the SDML. The SDML wouldn't back us if they didn't believe in us. We're dedicated to serving those public entities across South Dakota. We are only serving South Dakota public entities. We have no other interests at this point. As far as expanding coverage, we're going to take care of our people in our home state here. We are owned by our members. We don't have any private stakeholders. We are client-focused and service-driven. So you are always going to get our best face. Even if we're having a bad day, we're going to leave it at the door because you are our focus when we walk in your door. We're not an insurance company. We're not for profit. Any money that is made on any investments, that gets turned right back into the programs, right back into our members, right back into the services that we can offer to you. Okay? So I'd like to thank you. I give you my contact information, my email, my cell phone number. If you call it right now, it hopefully won't ring. But no, anything that you need, you just let us know. In the packet, there is information. You've got our org chart. You've got some reading material about the cyber liability coverage that is included. And then you've got the enhanced crime coverage. So enhanced crime coverage is not everything created equal. Our enhanced crime coverage does satisfy the fiduciary bonds required by statute. So Shayla's finance officer bond, for example, you guys pay $50 for $1 million in crime coverage with no dollar deductible. A regular bond through like CNA Surety is like $600 just for Shayla. So saving a ton of money by having that enhanced crime coverage. Again, not all blanket crime policies are created equal, so you just need to take a close look at that. In addition to the 3 brochures about the overview of the pool, the government practices, and the employment practices hotline, there is a little pamphlet about connections. Something about connections. We partner with the Work Comp Fund, which you guys are also a member of. This is mental health help for first responders. It does not have to be as a result of a traumatic incident. Any first responder who's having any type of mental health issue can call this hotline. It is confidential, it is free, it is included. There's information on there about how to go about that and who can qualify for a first responder. Right now, it's our law enforcement personnel, our ambulance, and our fire department people. But please, if nothing else tonight, if you do nothing else tonight, just hand these to your first responders, because if they don't know about it, they can't use it and they can't get the help that they need. Well, they could, but makes it a lot easier. So
This is also available to their spouses.
yes, spouses and family, 3 free counseling sessions, completely confidential.
I don't believe our ambulance service is covered through that because there's not city here.
Okay.
Because they're a hospital, they're affiliated.
Oh, yep. So, yep, nope,
It's
this would,
not the hospital, it's incorporated, it's not through.
Yeah.
okay,
there.
so then, yep, but anybody who's your first responders, that
Fire
are
and
covered, yep,
police.
your fire and your law enforcement folks, even just leave them on their desks. Because if they see the information, if they need help, because we really have a stigma of like, hey, you should just get over it, and sometimes they just can't, and that's okay. It's okay to get a little help. So that's in there. There's a little business card too. This packet gives you all the numbers. It has your schedules. It shows you, you've already asked a few questions about it, so you know you're looking at it, which is fantastic. Gives you those schedules, gives you the limits that you have, shows you kind of the breakdowns, where the money's going and stuff like that. So,
I had a couple of questions on the contract. Is now the appropriate time?
sure.
to-
The
Okay.
intergovernmental contract, yeah.
Yes. I guess I was just interested because I know it's a lot different than from like my regular insurance, and my husband's a contractor, it's different
Okay.
than their insurance.
Right.
So we have to do a 60-day notice.
Yes.
Written notice.
Yes. Before you leave. Yeah,
Other words, we pay the whole year's premium,
correct.
okay?
Yep.
Um,
And that would be due by
so
July,
what's the
like
purpose
11th.
of that?
Basically
I
what
just
that,
didn't
so the
understand
60-day
why.
notice, basically what that does is it allows our underwriting folks to realize who may or may not be coming on board, because our financials are based on anticipation of members renewing, right? So if we've got 60 days and we know that the city of Miller is not going to continue their membership, then we can, if we need to, allocate resources accordingly. And then also, we need to let our service providers know that effective a certain day, that you will no longer be participating in the risk-sharing pool and that your claims coverage would end. And another thing, if you do decide to depart from the pool, you will need to purchase retro coverage, because you have been a member of the pool since 1991, and none of those there's no look-back coverage. So once you leave, you take all those unknown, unreported losses with you. So you would want to purchase or look at purchasing some retro coverage to pick up any unknown, unreported losses. So you'd want to make sure you've got a quote for that exposure.
I guess that's the part I didn't understand. I didn't realize, I guess I thought all insurance was the same, where you, I mean, if I wanted to switch mine
Sure.
today, I could. So I just didn't understand what the whole contract part was about.
Yep, for the most part, that intergovernmental contract really outlines the rights and responsibilities of both parties. A lot of responsibilities on the risk pool to properly obtain and manage funds, do those correctly. We just needed a few things from you guys to make sure that we have the ability to do that.
Let's see, I think I had a couple other questions. So if the funds are liquidated for some huge event in more than one county, what happens then? Like how many millions of dollars would you be able to support?
So that's, and we kind of hit on it a little bit. So we have reinsurance. So we know that for every storm that we have a certain deductible that we have to hit. And right now, we already fund for, I think we fund at a 50% confidence level. So we can fund for at least 4 major wind hail events without issue every year. And then we have net position. There's a little bit of money that is set aside that is, without liquidating selling the entire portfolio, we can pay another 7 storms out, wind hail storms, and then roughly depending on the market, right? None of this is guaranteed, but, and then there's roughly, the pool has assets valued currently at about, I think the last I looked was right around $32 million.
And so that's for the whole state, right? For
Well,
anybody that's in the pool.
It's in claims, so those would be it would be liquidated to pay claims. But you're gonna know if the pool is in a financial state of hurt well before this, because you're gonna have information, you have access to the financials, they're done at the end of every month. So you can call me and say, hey, what's your net operating position, and I can provide that information to you.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's nothing you could get out of anyway, because you would have to pay for that whole year, no matter what the financials were, correct?
Well, so your contributions are collected, yep, at the beginning of your coverage term, right?
Okay.
Yep.
But $32 million for all of SDPAA,
That's the
total amount
investment
that they-
portfolio
that they
right
can-
now.
That they can pay out.
That's what we have in assets right now, based on the, well, okay, that was the amount roughly as of the end of the last financial statement that I have. And that's approximately.
And then in the case that would happen, if I'm reading this correctly, payment of valid claims would be the sole and separate obligation of each individual member, so we would have to then pay that difference?
Sure, if we didn't have enough money, and if we liquidated everything, and then after everything was liquidated, if there was still claims, then those would become your responsibility. Yep. This is something, though, that our board of directors, this is why we have a financial and actuarial study done every year, and why we have people like that tell us what our funding needs to be. This is why we purchase reinsurance, not just for our property claims, but also for our liability claims, so that we don't get in that position where we have all these claims that we can't pay. Because just like you have a deductible, you've determined how much risk you're willing to take on. We have deductibles on all of those policies too. So we're not just willy-nillying this and stuff like that. This is a very conservative board that is, I mean, you seem like you're a conservative board, but our board is very conservative also. And they take the management of the financial package very, very seriously.
But your reinsurance wouldn't then cover our leftover claims?
The reinsurance would continue to pay. The reinsurance pays until their funds are exhausted. So we are covered just like we cover you. We are covered by reinsurance.
One other question, when you were talking about the wind, or the, excuse me, wind and hail
Yeah.
damage, can you go over that?
Yeah, okay, so
Briefly again.
an example would be so during the May 12th storm last year, we had a lot of wind. And some companies will have a wind and hail deductible. So they'll have a $5,000 deductible for wind hail events, but you might have a $500 deductible for a fire event. So for fire, if a building's burned down by fire, it's a $500 deductible. For a wind hail, they will charge you a different deductible.
I meant on the, you had said something about cosmetic damage.
Oh, cosmetic damage. So basically what cosmetic damage is it's not functional, and some commercial policies will exclude it if it's not functional damage. They'll say, well, we're sorry that your roof doesn't look as pretty, but we're not covering that. It has to be functional damage, so your roof has to have failed. We don't have that exclusion. If your roof is damaged, if your metal roof now looks like the surface of your golf ball, we will take care of that if it's totaled. If all the panels are damaged and it's totaled, then we pay you the actual cash value payment until you've replaced it. Once you've replaced it with like kind and quality materials or better, then we pay you the replacement cost up to what you had before. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Good. This is why I'm glad I was a claims person before this, so I can answer like, oh, I know that. I've handled that. I've done that.
Question behind you.
Yes.
I'll try to speak loudly. So the 32 million basically is the amount that you could pay for deductible. That's the right.
32 million is the value, it's the invested value. We would
Right, so
liquidate that.
If you had the reinsurance, and let's say the whole state was
Mhm.
right? And you had the reinsurance, you could pay 32 million in deductible, reinsurance would pay the rest of it. So it would never come to 32.
Right, yep, and the pools purchased amounts, those, I mean, we have several layers, like property is really the thing we're talking about, right? Because there's no one liability claim that's gonna hit the entire state. That would be a state problem. But So it's property, and they do, they have maps and speckle tests, and they look at catastrophic losses, and they say, okay, if a whole storm hit certain areas, like what do we need, and if it hit the whole state, all of those studies are done, and all of that is taken into consideration when we look at what our reinsurance limits are, what our values need to be, what deductibles we want to take on, how we fund and stuff like that. So there's tons and tons of studies. Guys, there's people who are pay grades above me that love to play with numbers that handle that kind of stuff. So,
And then in a big area, the state gets hit, FEMA's gonna come in too,
sure.
I think, to help out
Right.
even communities that get hit
Yep.
hard.
Yeah.
FEMA.
Right. If we have a catastrophic event like that, FEMA is going to declare it, and then they'll get information from us or any other insurance company to outline what's been paid, what hasn't been paid. We actually are working with people from last year's derecho storm and the other storm that didn't get classified as a derecho, as far as to obtain FEMA money and stuff like that. Because there are things, some infrastructure might have been damaged that they didn't have covered and what have you. So,
Another question, sorry.
no, you're great.
You work with you cover the county as well, correct?
Yes, so we cover counties, cities, townships, special purchasing districts,
But
so,
you cover Can County,
yes,
okay, so like, let's say a derecho happened.
it did,
And,
yes.
yeah, and a tree falls from the county and hits the city building.
Okay,
It's the same insurance company, so you're not gonna have like problems back and forth or anything.
no, nope. And honestly, in a tree situation, if there's a wind event, that tree, if you have damage to your structure, then it will just fall within whatever other wind damage you probably have. That's not really a liability situation. If there was a gentle breeze and the tree fell over onto your building, then there would be some discussion between the two adjusters as far as, well, did the county know or should have known that the tree was bad? Yes, no, then they look at it that way. But in a giant storm event, typically there's not a lot of it's my tree, it's your tree, it's, the tree was blown and
But
stuff
if
like that.
something from the county damages the city, or the city damages something from the county, you're both in the same insurance, so it's kind of.
Right. It is a lot easier to just yell across the aisle, like, hey, what's going on, and talk to your fellow adjusters, and then if you need to get the pool involved. So we do get involved sometimes when there's some coverage discussions, coverage questions. We are able to step in and be kind of an intermediary. Again, I was pretty instrumental in working with and writing those coverage documents, so I have stepped in a time or two, again, just as a liaison and as a proponent for the member, saying, listen, this is the intent of the coverage document, this is how coverage is going to go, and we work it that way. Great questions. What other questions?
If we have a lawsuit brought against us,
Yeah.
what kind of coverage for lawyers do we have?
So your defense costs are in addition to your $2 million limit. So as long as there's a covered allegation, then the defense costs are in addition to that limit. There are some things that insurance or coverage, our coverage cannot cover, like punitive damages. It's against public policy for insurance of any kind to cover punitive damages because the intent is to punish whoever did the wrong thing.
Right.
So Judge Schreier gave you that little nugget. She issued that opinion a couple years ago, actually a few years ago now, because I was still working claims when she put it in writing that there can be no coverage for punitive or exemplary damages because they're intended to punish and to send a message.
But actual attorney fees?
Actual attorney fees, so defense costs in addition to that $2 million limit. Plaintiff attorney fees, if awarded as part of a damage, would be included in that $2 million limit.
So am I reading this right, that the $2 million general liability costs $32,000 a year?
Yes. Yep. And that primarily is based on your operating expenditures, so that's how we rate. We rate based on basically your budget, because that gives us a good picture of what you're doing and what your exposures are. So your invoice changes, people, they call and they ask if our rates are gonna change. Honestly, our rates usually don't fluctuate too significantly. A lot of the invoice changes happen because of changes within your own budgets, your property values, changes in items that we're covering and stuff like that. Our underwriters try to keep We usually tell members to budget for between 10 and 15% off of last year's invoice, plus any changes that they've made mid-year.
So if you wanted to, does it get cheaper the higher you go?
So yes, if you look, when you look at limits, so at the end of the day, it costs more, but for each additional million, it's cheaper. Like when you look at like, okay, the first million, for example, might be 10,000. The second is only 8,000. The third is, so as you get higher, it gets cheaper, but it will still, I mean, the overall total obviously is not gonna be cheaper, but yes. The first million will cost you more than the fifth million, if that, does that make sense? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you touch a little bit on how your rates, how much they raise in a year's time, generally speaking?
So it depends on what so again, our rates are different than a regular commercial carrier rate. So our rates are based on whatever the expenditures are for the pool, whatever the funding demands are based on what our actuaries think storms are gonna happen and stuff like that. Our underwriters try to keep the rates not more than 10 or 15% different each year. If you just looked at rates, but you can't really just look at rates because it's not just we don't just charge like a set rate per person because we don't rate off of full-time and part-time employees. We rate off of your expenditures. So you can't just say, well, the rate goes up 12%, so our bill's gonna go up 12% if you've had a 25% budget increase, because now you've got two factors there that have changed. Does that make sense?
This might be going down the rabbit
You
hole,
want
but,
Patrick, your microphone, go ahead.
so, since it's a pool, how would that affect Miller if we did nothing wrong, but then all of a sudden a bunch of other cities weren't looking out for themselves and messed up the pool? Can we be at risk of other people in the same pool? And this is, like I said, going down the rabbit hole, but
Sure,
will
and
that affect?
So that's a basic theory, not just of pooling, but also of insurance. So whenever you purchase insurance, everybody's experiences, because if an insurance company has a bad year, everybody's rates go up. With the pool, if a few people have a bad year, yes, we will all share in those losses. It will not be immediate though. If like last year's derecho, we've had some really good property years and we've had some really awful property years. Last year was a really awful property year. We have about 13 million in losses from property claims last year, but we are not going to have a substantial increase in our property rate because we have other years that we do have in there to help kind of offset some
Average
of
it
those
out.
bad years. Yeah.
Good.
And I get a question. Sorry.
I want to move you just right.
I know, right?
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
So you said it's based off of invoices, and because we've been doing all of these projects, is that 32,000 higher than it would have been if we hadn't been doing all these projects?
So it depends on how we put together your financials, because we offer you the opportunity to deduct out some of those capital improvements. Certain types of fees we actually pull out of your general expenditures so that then you have a more stable operating budget. But if you have a year where you are doing a lot of projects, then that might give you a bump, and then the next year you might recognize a decrease because now you're done with a lot of projects that you don't have capital outlay for and stuff like that. Yes. And now, I will tell you, you're asking some underwriting type questions, so pretty soon I might be like, you know what, I will have to have Christina answer those because she loves that kind of stuff, and I've got a pretty high view of it. But when you start getting down into the nitty gritty, then I'll let you know.
Defer.
Yes, yes.
Do you guys use local contractors if there isn't an accident, like if a hailstorm comes through here?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So we actually try to work with your contractors, but if we find that you're just getting a number that seems really high, then we will call in another local contractor. I mean, local, like we might call in a guy from
Huron or
Aberdeen or
Pierre or
Huron,
something.
Pierre,
Right.
something like that. But yeah, we're not gonna bring in someone from Minneapolis
Right.
or Denver to do your work. We're not gonna require you to use any particular person and stuff like that. Our goal is to work with your local people because we understand that you have relationships that you need to maintain with these people too, so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. And just to be clear, we would have come here every night for a week if that's what you guys wanted, but we just wanted to make sure that everybody got the information, the same information at the same time. So happy to come to Miller, maybe not in the middle of some of the snowstorms we had this last year. Some of those were crazy, but happy to come anytime. You asked
And you-
really great questions. I'm very proud
Well,
of you.
this is,
It's a big decision.
it's a big decision, so
It
we need
absolutely is.
to, and I appreciate the outside questions too as well, so.
I have one more question. I remember one time before we were talking about possibly going with a different, insurance person. If they leave, can they come back?
There's a 2-year, so under the current intergovernmental contract, if you leave, you take your unknown unreported claims with you, and we can't quote you for 2 years.
And then is there a cap number of times we can leave and come back or
No.
anything like that?
Nope.
Has
Nope.
Miller ever left before?
No, you've been consistently in the pool since September 9th, 1991. So that is where your look-back coverage goes to, is back to 1991.
So does our history from 91 to present make a lot of difference in our quote?
So your loss ratio is based on your last 3 complete years of coverage. So no, I mean, it doesn't play into, like, if you had some really, really bad years early on, those are historical.
They're gone.
Yep, we don't look at any of that. It's just, we don't look at September 22 to 23 yet because it's not a complete year when we calculate what your loss ratio is. And if you had a bad year 4 years ago, then that will fall off and then but obviously you don't have bad years because you have a 60% or less loss ratio because you're getting that loss ratio credit.
So any negative loss that we have is essentially eliminated after 3 years?
Yep, yeah, it falls off your loss ratio history. Yep,
As far as the property values go,
yeah,
and you said that you guys would send somebody here to evaluate those
yeah.
every 5 years?
It will be every 5 years. It was 4 until recently,
Can
and now
we
we're going to
request
5.
to have that done more often? Is that an option to maintain a little bit better accuracy on
Sure.
values?
Yeah, if that's something you guys are like, no, we really want it every 3, then we would just work with safety benefits to get you into a different rotation.
Does that cost money?
Not yet. No, we don't charge extra for the property surveys or anything like
Have you
that.
had any cities doing that since the cost of construction has got so crazy lately?
No, we haven't had anybody request one earlier than they were otherwise scheduled. And part of that lends to the blanket limit. So when you look at your schedule, that spreadsheet that shows your real property, so the value associated with your individual property is not the limit for a claim on that property. Your blanket limit is. And the blanket limit is the total of all your property values. And that's the most that you would be paid in any one claim, regardless of the number of properties involved.
So if a tornado took it all,
If a tornado took it all, if you became the next Spencer, South Dakota, the blanket limit is the most that you would be paid. And so when we start making changes to property values, we keep one eye on that blanket limit at all times.
So are you saying that you would pay more than what it's valued at if in the event of a
Yeah.
total loss?
Yep, so like let's just look at,
Blanket is $17,951,411.
yeah,
So if our
so,
town got wiped out, that's what we would be for coverage,
yep,
right?
yep. So like, I'm just gonna say the water tower because it's the first one on the list. So right now we have the water tower listed at basically 1.1 million. And if a tornado came through and totally wiped that out and it was $2 million to replace it, we would replace it with like kind and quality materials up to the 17.9. If that was the only location. If all of your locations were destroyed, we'd pay up to the 17.9 to replace it. Or it's the actual cash value. The most that would be paid is that blanket limit for any one or all of the structures.
So after that, it would be on us.
Right, yep.
But if the
And
water
FEMA.
tower cost $400,000 more than what we got it on the schedule for,
Yep.
we would get paid.
As long as
Right.
it's under the blanket amount.
Yep, as long as it's under the blanket amount.
Okay.
That's why I said, that's why we kind of keep an eye on that blanket, make sure that you're always comfortable with that number. And you have the opportunity to change that. So we give you what your minimum should be after property surveys. You can say, no, we want the water tower at 5 million. We want City Hall at 12 million. You can do that. We probably wouldn't recommend that because then you will pay for that value, but you have the option actually at any time to change your values.
So like if City Hall was taken out, what is City Hall insured at?
It's right here.
So,
I just saw it. Yeah, $677,949.
Yep.
So if it got taken out, it's because the $1.5 million water tower
Yeah.
fell.
in a really big storm, yeah. So that 677, that's the number your contribution dollars are based on. Your limit is the 17.9. Yeah, because all of your locations are covered at replacement cost, so that means you would receive the cost to rebuild that structure or one like it. City Hall was destroyed, but you don't want to rebuild City Hall, you want to build a community center. Basically what happens then is we pay you actual cash value for this structure based on age, condition, materials at the time of the loss, and then once you rebuild your location, the limit is either it's the lesser of the cost of the new structure or to rebuild this with like kind and quality materials. So you're not required to rebuild a city hall. For example, I handled claims for a school coverage in Wyoming, and they had a bus barn burned down, but they didn't need a bus barn. So they built a community center, and we just wrote them after all of their repairs were done, the rebuild was done, we paid them for what they could have rebuilt that bus barn for. And that's same thing that would happen here.
So like these numbers are approximately 3 years old,
Yep.
right? As far as the
Well,
quotes.
they're approximately 3 years old, but they're trended. So we trend every year. It has been 3% with inflation. This year, your 2023 renewal was trended 7.5%.
Okay.
Which these numbers don't.
Reflect
that.
This does. So your 1.1 million on your water tower,
Yep.
that reflects 2 years at 3% inflation and 1 year at 7.5%, roughly.
That's just automatically bumped every year.
Yep. So underwriting, they set the inflation amount, they set that at the same time they set the rates, and all of that is approved at our October board meeting.
So this is all self-contained with yourselves in the state of South Dakota. There's no like other governing body
No.
watching any of this or checks and balances, anything like that.
So we don't report to legislative audit or a Department of Revenue or anything like that, but we do have financial audits every year.
Okay.
Right now, we have our drafted financial audit. I'm waiting for my actuarial audit, and then our finance committee will review those together, and then we will adopt them hopefully at our July meeting. And then those would be available if you ever wanted to see those. Those then get posted, our audited financials get posted out on our website. Yes, and when we make changes to our program, especially to our intergovernmental contract, we actually do talk to Department of Legislative Audit, because any changes that we make might impact you, so we want to make sure that they understand what we're doing and they're comfortable with it. So we're not hiding anything or anything like that. We're very open. We invite you to take a look, because this is your investment too.
Do you have anything to do with the insurance commission?
While we're not regulated by the insurance commission, our claims people, if there's a complaint filed with the insurance commission, like against our claims people, we respond to them just like if we were commercial insurance. So before I came back to South Dakota, so I was born in Watertown, grew up, went to SDSU. I'm going back to SDSU now. we moved to Des Moines for 5 years, and I worked for a commercial insurance company for 5 years in Des Moines. And then when we moved back here, it's the same process. They write a letter, explain, hey, this is what the complaint is. Our response is, you know, we recognize that we're not governed by, but we follow the exact same claims handling guidelines, the good faith practices, all of that. We abide by that because that's just good practice. I mean, those rules are there for a reason, and we should be following those just like everybody else. I like to say we hold ourselves to a higher standard than what the claims practices require, but. Do you have any questions about the hotlines, training?
Well, see, that's, I guess that's what was going to kind of get at. We have the insurance aspect of it, but there's other services that you provide. So just in a brief nutshell, some of those other services, again, I know you talked about it.
Yeah.
You have the insurance aspect of it.
Right.
But these are the things that you help us with regard to what we need to do to help minimize the risk.
Right,
Okay.
yes. So the number one thing that you can do is participate in those loss control surveys. So again, every 4 years, Safety Benefits comes out. They get with probably your Public Works Department. They'll talk to Shayla. They talk to department heads. They review what your policies are, what personnel policies you have. If you need updated personnel policies or other policies, we have access to that. We work with not only the SDML, but we work with local council to make sure that those are kind of all up on the up and up, make sure that we're following state laws. We've got different versions of policies and procedures if you need them. They will identify, hey, you have fire extinguishers that are bad, you have this lip in the sidewalk that you need to fix. So they help identify some of those hazards and then give you recommendations for how to remediate them or some timelines and stuff like that. We can help you find some resources, especially where it comes to policy management. We've got a ton of resources that way. And then all of those online training opportunities through Aurora Pictures, through NeoGov. So that's a variety of topics. There's a lot of slip, trip, falls. There's actually a lot of cyber videos out there, a lot of information about fishing. Fishing has actually become a pretty, not just out on the river, but it's when they come and they sit in your email and they watch how you do business, and then they send. So we have an example. We've had 2 claims now where a hacker has not penetrated personally identifiable information, but they sit in the email and they watch how we do our exchanges. And then they become a vendor that we know. And they say, hey, we're updating our banking information, so can you just update that for the next ACH? Yeah, absolutely, because we trust them, right? We know Joe from down the street, and we know that Sherry is his secretary, and she would never steer us wrong. Well, then we get an invoice, and we pay it, and there was never actually an invoice. So we've had 2 members fall victim to that. The bigger one, the first one they got through was $120,000. That money is just gone. But when the vendor sent a $400,000 bill, the bank actually called and said, hey, this is not within the normal course of your history. So can you just double check? And sure enough, they had been hacked and they had been phished. And so our crime coverage actually stepped up and paid that large claim, but and is looking at the second one where it was a similar thing, only it was payroll. They got an email to update some payroll information. Hey, my bank account changed, can you just update it? And then the employee came in the day after payday. Why didn't I get my paycheck? And like, oh, well, you changed your banking information. No, I did not. So there's some good videos on there about that kind of education. Just education is key to all of this, and that's what we want to bring to you is different ways to get educated. First of all, identifying the risks, and then how to avoid them. So.
I get that payroll one on almost a daily basis.
Yes, it's crazy.
And
I don't.
also got, I had the mayor, Ron Blatchford, sitting at my desk, and I got an email from him saying, I'm in a meeting right now, please send me this,
Oh,
and this.
yes.
And I'm like, hey, Ron, you just sent me an email and you asked a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
He gets this
Or-
kind of look on his face, I'm like, no, I know, it's just
Yeah.
a
It's
scam.
just, it's just a scam. Yeah, or go get me a bunch of gift cards. We see a lot of that. But then also there is so many training opportunities through Safety Benefits, defensive driving. Tracy does a fantastic civility presentation. We've had some counties out west that needed some help in how to just even talk to each other. You know, they were all new and they didn't really have the relationships that maybe you guys have. So lots of in-person training. You can request individual training for like your different departments. All of that is included in resources that you would have access to via the pool.
So like that training, like we go to MSHA.
Yeah.
training, Then points that you were talking about that we get, is that part of the points, like we get points off that when we go to them trainings or?
So it plays into your loss control. So you can actually qualify too for your loss control awards, the safety awards. We give those away every year, and so they will take that into consideration when you're applying for safety awards because there's certain tiers and criteria that you meet. But yes, so they don't directly play into whether or not you get your loss control credits, but MSHA training is pretty critical for those of you who need your MSHA renewals and stuff like that. So, and that's offered at almost, I think, free to members, other than maybe some travel costs and stuff like that. Non-members do pay a fee to attend that MSHA training.
So I just briefed over the government practices hotline and the employment practices hotline.
Yeah.
Looks like you have 1 hour of free.
Yep, you're guaranteed one
1
free
hour,
hour
and then you pay for it after that.
for each call. You're guaranteed one free hour. A lot of times council will call and say, hey, this is gonna take a couple hours. We generally pay those, but you're guaranteed one free hour
Per call?
per topic, yeah.
Right.
Yep, per topic.
Because we have a couple of them that we've used that quite often, and we have one that's still in the works, so we've never paid anything, and it's been
Yeah.
way more than an hour, but they completely covered
Yep.
100% of that.
Yep. The brochure says an hour. Typically, I've not yet closed a member down. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Anything? Okay.
And
Thank
you
you
know
very
that you
much.
can call. I mean,
Yes.
if you don't make a decision tonight, that's totally fine. If you're later, you're sitting on the patio having a coffee or beverage and you're like, oh, what about this? You can call, email, text, whatever. You've got my contact information.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I know there's a lot to dissect, you know, we've heard one presentation, like I said, the 3 of the 6 of us have heard the, or 3 of the 7 of us heard the, Joe's presentation, and Steve's here too as well, so. Any questions you may have with regard to Lynn or to Joe with regard to anything that we have that's been brought up?
I have a question for Joe. On your policy or your quote, let's say we got a big storm. Is it like one deductible like she was talking? Or is it deductible, say the water tower did fall on City Hall, is it one deductible for the 2 or 2 deductibles?
So, on the proposal there on page 14, you'll see we do have a wind hail deductible of $2,500 per building. That's pretty standard now in the commercial market. Actually, that's pretty low for the commercial market. But yes, there for wind hail deductible, there is $2,500 per building. But that's just for wind hail.
Okay.
Yep.
Tornado, wind.
Yes.
And your liability is also quoted at 2 million?
No. I'll just give you a brief overview here. Steve, you wanna come up here? I'll just kind of touch on a few of the highlighted topics that we kind of covered in the finance committee meeting. I'm not gonna go through this entire proposal, but I'll kind of let Steve talk to you. He can introduce himself and kind of what he does on the risk management side for our agency too as well.
So yeah, my name is Steve Lincoln. I've got, my background is about 33 years of claims, loss control, risk management experience dealing with commercial property, commercial general liability, workers' comp, commercial auto. Those are kind of the general things that I've been working on the last 33 years of my professional career. I've been with ATI about 5 years, and again, my role is to kind of help the agency and help the customers. We also have an in-house claims team, which is not like an insurance company claims team. So what happens when you submit a claim to us, we get it to the insurance company, we help navigate that through, make sure that there's no issues. If there is an issue that comes up, we get involved. And normally that doesn't happen, but we just want to make sure that the process works. Again, we'll be there, the claims will be filed through your local agent, Joe. And, you know, we'll get involved if we need to. From a safety culture standpoint, if requested by you, the city, you know, I'll come out on a yearly on-site safety audits, review your policies and procedures. That's typically probably not a yearly thing. Hopefully, we look at policies and procedures 1 year and they don't change significantly, I'm guessing, by the next year. I've reviewed current safety programs, provide on-site training, development of staff on what safety-related topics. We also have a risk management center, which is a web-based type software of suite, if you want to call it like that. It has training options on there, online training options where individuals can be assigned certain trainings. Maybe you have one department in the city that requires this type of training. They can be assigned that. Another department can be assigned a totally different training in there. And then these managers or supervisors can track whether the employees have taken the tests or the trainings. And then usually there's a quiz that comes on after each one of those, and you can tell whether that employee passed the quiz. Pretty basic. Included in that is some safety data sheets kind of online. If you have safety data sheets all over the place, if you're familiar with what SDS sheets are, they're online. So if you have a smartphone, you have access to them. You get something in the eye, you ingest something, you know what to do. You know where to go. If you have general contractors that you work with, making sure you get their certificates of insurance, and maybe you already do that. This is a kind of a repository of those certificates of insurance, which you can then track. If it's a multi-year type of a thing, you can make sure that if the renewal is sent, it automatically will send an automatic renewal out. Make sure you have the right limits. It'll check all that for you. And plus, on top of that, there's just 2,000 plus type toolbox talks and posters and safety things and things like that out there that you can kind of peruse at your leisure. That's just from the agency perspective. From the carrier perspective, wish Trevor was here. He has a lot more of that information, but and I don't know if you were going to get into that, but maybe I'll let Joe get into that.
So, just to, again, to highlight a few points here for you. So on the proposal on the property section on page 8, it just kind of lists, this is also blanketed coverage. You've got your blanket business personal property, and then all your structures are blanketed with specific values for the buildings. One thing that if the council were to decide to move forward with us, those of you that are contractors know this, and this is a big thing in the commercial insurance world here lately, is the increased cost of building materials over the last couple of years, plus top that with inflation. You know, just I noticed some of these structures, even though it is blanketed, it would be important, I would wanna sit down with you guys on an annual basis to make sure that, because what's everybody's biggest fear, you know, a tornado. If something did come through, you know, like for example, 630,000 for this building, no way you could rebuild this for that. You know, Dustin would know more on the substations. You got different values on some of your substations, one 2.5 million, and then you got a couple other ones that are 2.4 and one's 1.3 million. You know, is that adequate for substations? You know, may or may not be. You know, we've done a lot of improvements to the floodlights of the ball fields, insured for 302,000. The fire hall across the street, 886. You know, a lot of these things, we would definitely need to increase those just to make sure if there is a catastrophic event that you've got adequate, even with the blanket coverage on there. So, Intact Insurance on page 15, just to give you a little background on what Intact is. They specialize in municipalities. That's what they do. They insure over 50 municipalities in the state of South Dakota. They do from teeny tiny small rural townships all the way up to cities the size of Rapid City. They are, not only are they South Dakota, they are nationwide. They insure cities as large as Chicago and Cincinnati. So they have the exposures from small communities all the way up to very large. So they are very, very well knowledgeable in municipalities. The other thing too with Intact is they are A+ rated by A&M Best. They're a very financially sound company, reinsurance as well, but they are regulated by the South Dakota Division of Insurance. So if for some reason you had a problem, some major problem with a claim, and you had to report it, you know, they are regulated by the Division of Insurance. And the other thing too, if for some crazy reason they became insolvent, you know, you wouldn't be hung out to dry. The Division of Insurance would step in at that point too. So just so you're reassured on that level. General liability section on page 17. So your commercial general liability occurrence limit is $1 million with a $2 million aggregate. And then on the next page is your professional liabilities. So these ones are very important for those of you sitting on the council, the elected officials. You've got public officials, errors and omissions. Basically what that is you know, if there's alleged misstatements or misleading statements that you have a lawsuit for. Public officials' employment practices liability, if you were to terminate someone's employment for an illegal reason, even though we are an at-will state, that does not mean you can just terminate anybody's employment. You can't terminate somebody because of their age, their race, you know, their sexual orientation, things like that. That's what that is for. Public officials, employee benefits administration. You know, if for some reason an employee forgot to get added to the group health plan and something happened there, you've got $1 million liability, and then also your law enforcement liability, you've got $1 million there as well. The crime portion, the next page, that is for, you know, employee, you can see the list there, employee dishonesty, forgery or alteration, theft of money and securities, you got $500,000 liability limits there as well. And then on your business auto section, you've got $1 million. One of the things that was talked about earlier is your current policy provides uninsured and underinsured motorists of 50,000. This does provide 100,000, but when we met in the finance committee meeting, we had suggested even going up to $1 million because, you know, let's say you have an employees are covered, yes, under your work comp policy, but if you're carrying a guest, somebody that's not an employee in the vehicle, or if our law enforcement is giving a ride to someone, you know, and you have an accident that's caused by an uninsured or underinsured, you know, those costs, can add up pretty quickly. So that is something that we would recommend looking at, potential higher limits there as well. I'm not gonna go through the vehicle list. You guys got a ton of vehicles. You can see the list there. Most of them have $1,000 comp and collision. The thing I really want to touch on is page 23. And that's the excess liability section. So what this is basically it's a $5 million umbrella. and you can see what the underlying coverages are that it covers. So I previously covered your auto liability limits of $1 million. Well, this would be an additional 5 million above and beyond that. So additionally, you'd have 6 million. Your commercial general liability, same thing. And then you go back to that page that I talked about on page 18, your professional liability. That's very important for those of you sitting at this table here to have, you know, this day and age, law enforcement liability, they're under a microscope nationwide. You know, you hear lawsuits all the time, you know. Say
Are your
one of
numbers
your,
the same as Joe's? No. Yeah,
Oh,
just
are
off, that, I'm finding it and stuff, so
Oh.
the professional liability is on page 19.
oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right.
But the big thing is, you know, say one of your employees backs out of the city shop over here and there's a kid riding his bike to the pool or something, runs over and kills them, or city employees driving through town and hits a busload full of kids. Well, $2 million, like, probably not gonna be enough in that scenario with your auto liability. So that $5 million umbrella, that's something that we highly recommend. It's gonna blanket all three of those underlying policies, so that's extremely important. And then on the next page, you've got your cyber liability. This is an excellent policy. It's with CFC. Very, very broad coverages. 2 pages of coverages there. You've got 500,000, I believe. Right now, you have a $100,000 deductible on your cyber. This policy would have a $10,000 deductible, and you can see there's a lot of different coverages here because cyber can be a lot of different things this day and age. And the thing is, you only hear in the news about the ones, you know, the targets and the big ones that get hit, but most cyber claims are smaller communities, and because they don't have a monitoring system, you know, in place. So like incident response costs, legal and regulatory costs, extortion, you know, you can go through those. Again, there's 2 pages of them, but this is a very,
page?
very broad and very.
Joe, what page are you on?
Be 24 and 25, so
It's
25 and
on
6.
here.
25 and 26?
Yep.
You new ones are off.
I'm on 26.
Yeah, printed the new ones. Apparently we're missing a page.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry for that.
No, that's fine,
okay.
that's,
I think the 3 new ones.
Once I figured it
actually
out, then I could keep up.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, your guys has got printed, yeah, so we got printed different, but, and then on page 26, which I assume is probably 27 for those of you on the finance committee, is the proposal summary. It just, it breaks down the premium, what's that? 28.
28.
Two
We're there,
pages.
we're there, no, we're there, we're there.
But you can see that it has a breakdown for each section, your commercial property, your general liability, and then the total premium. And then you can see if you decided for whatever reason you didn't want the $5 million umbrella, you know, there's about a $2,000 difference in premium, but I'm pretty confident that that's not something that you guys would be interested in. So, but there is different options there. And then, most of these back pages just talk about some of the benefits of Intact. Your very last page is your human resources risk management services for public utility entities. So you've got unlimited HR advice by telephone, you've got training for managers and employees, toll-free employee complaint hotline. You know, if there's employees have an issue, they have an outlet as well. Public sector employment law updates and webinars, online knowledge center, that's 24/7. So a lot of great benefits that they provide with their policy as well. So, you know, a few other things with this is, you know, we're hoping that if the council decides to move forward with the American Trust Insurance, we're hoping to make this a long-term relationship. But one thing that, you know, if for some reason, you know, we don't require, let's say we partnered for 3, 5, 10 years, whatever, we would not require 60 days notice. You guys, if you decided midterm for whatever reason, 5 years down the road that you found a better option, you can cancel your policy and you'd be reimbursed any unused premium at any time. So We just have to stay on our toes to make sure that, that doesn't happen, but you do have out there, defense costs. We had talked about that in the finance committee. Defense costs are outside your liability limits. They are not included in that, so, those can add up very quickly in a liability claim, so those are outside those, liability limits. The other thing that I think obviously sets us apart is we hope to do business with the city of Miller. We're literally right next door. Anytime any of you need anything, have any questions, concerns, whether it be the council, employees, we're right next door. You're doing business with a local agency who gives back in the community. There's all, you're supporting those of us that are local people that have lived here our entire lives. We serve on civic and commerce boards, we coach youth programs, so those tax dollars are staying right here and supporting a local business, and we think that's very important. And living here, we're seeing the different exposures, we see the day-to-day things going on here, we're here every day, we're involved. That's just something you can't put a price tag on. So, I know we covered a lot of things more in depth in the finance committee meeting, so if some of you other three have any questions, I know I kind of quickly went through that proposal, but if you have any questions for us, fire away.
I think and I'll just start out, one of the questions, do you cover municipalities and utilities and substations? The answer is yes. So, with some of the situations that have unfortunately taken place on that. As far as law enforcement liability, yes, with regard to that, and it was in here.
Yep.
What are your annual rate increases generally look like?
Intact stays they're for the most part, they stay pretty, they haven't had much for rate increases. Your normal inflation, things like that, but they don't take huge hikes and things like that. Obviously that,
Can you put a number
anybody
on
in the
it,
insurance
percentage?
world knows that can change if they have catastrophic losses. That's,
Like
That's-
3 to 5%.
yeah. Yep.
That's what Trevor said.
Yep.
That's what I
Yes,
had written
that's
down.
what I had written down too. I just wanted to.
So Intact is kind of like a provider of a lot of these insurances that's partnering, or that's the underwriter. Or explain, I'm not insurance person.
Yeah, Intact is the company and they specialize in municipalities, yep.
So then we talk with you about like, hey, we just want Intact or whoever to come through and just kind of overlook everything, kind of something that's been happening in the past.
Yep, Steve can do all that, yep. Steve can, he does that with a lot of our commercial clients. He'll come do walkthroughs and recommendations and, things
That-
to prevent.
And intact will as well.
Yep, well, either one, yep.
Additional costs with any of that?
Nope.
At our request?
Yes.
Question. So Intact is the one that insures the municipalities, does American Trust Insurance insure any municipalities?
Well, we're not an insurance company. We're the agency.
You're just the agency,
Yes.
so you just pull it through.
Right.
Okay. Do you have any other municipalities that you sell to?
That we sell to, American Trust Insurance, yes. We have, about 10 others in the state that we do, yep. Yep, you bet.
How about law enforcement and EMS, stuff like that?
As far as,
American Trust Insurance covering them?
what do we have?
As far as liability, you're talking about liability? Okay.
You know what we got, Steve?
I don't, top of my head, don't know, outside of the 10, I don't know how many of the 10 include
include that, but, outside of that, I guess I don't know off the top of my head.
The committee can put, basically with regard to that, and this was a question, do you have law enforcement liability? Yes, most counties have, small police force, so, yeah, that was reassured that, yeah.
I had on my notes, something about 90% fire department.
Yep. They got that on here too.
Like you guys had 90% of the fire departments or something?
Oh, yeah, intact,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, in the state, yep, correct.
That's what I thought it meant, but
Yeah.
sometimes my notes and my memory don't work
Well,
right.
I have the same thing too, so.
I write the notes, but I'm thinking, what was that pertaining to?
Yep, City of Miller, or Miller Fire
But
Department.
I was never a good note taker in
Yes.
school, I'll be honest right now.
all three had the same,
Yeah, it's funny, it's kind of, we picked up the same points.
And Trevor, he does a lot of that training too with the, fire departments, yep. In fact, that's why he's not here tonight, that's what he's doing.
He's at least on one, if not two fire departments.
Yeah, he was gone all last week too, that's why I couldn't get him here, but, yeah.
And just to confirm, this policy is gonna cover the Miller Fire Department as well.
No, they have their own,
They have to.
yes.
I guess we were talking about the water tower falling on City Hall. You're talking about yearly going through that. Is that a fixed number, or if it does take more than the number on your sheet to rebuild this place? Is that there, or is that number fixed, I guess? is what I'm-
No, we have blanket coverage, but the reason that I would wanna sit down and make sure that these are adequately insured, increase the values is, like I said, if we do have a catastrophic
Yeah.
event that wiped everything out, you don't wanna be $2, $3, $4 million underinsured and then
And
you're on
that's-
your own.
I use this, but like, talking about the subs, the way
Yeah.
transformers are, they've doubled.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why,
So
You
as
know.
construction and materials, at least doubled or more.
yeah, that's why I wasn't sure some of your substations have different values on them. You would know better than anybody why one is half of the other, but, and those may need to be adjusted, that would be something we would sit down and make sure that if something did happen.
Go through with each department and see, what needs what and if
Right.
this is right and.
Mhm.
Regardless what happens, I do know that, yes, it's a 7 to 10% average increase, but any construction good is at least 200, 300% more than it was 2 years
Right.
ago.
In a year out.
And a year out.
Right,
Yeah,
if
but
you can get the parts.
the biggest thing that all our underwriters with all our commercial companies, well, even personal lines too, the biggest thing that they're saying is that so many structures are so grossly underinsured when, when they're having, losses just because everything's just gone through the roof, and so.
Okay.
I don't know what the intent of the council is, if they're gonna, or when we're gonna act, but this says, it's valid for 30 days from May 15th.
Yeah, well, that was when we originally did it, but they're
So
they're
if they
good
didn't,
with it.
if we wanted to kinda compare apples to oranges and do it at the next meeting, we would be good?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Will we can vote at the next meeting, so no deadlines are passed?
That gives
Cause
us,
that'd be Monday,
We can
right? Next
compare-
Monday?
That's kind of why
Tuesday.
we had
Tuesday?
the special meeting.
We can compare each one that way.
Yeah,
We had the special meeting.
I
so
would
we
like
would
that.
all be
A little
at
time with
next
both.
meeting.
Yes.
but I wanna thank
oh,
both
gosh,
of you
yes,
for
yes.
all
Everybody.
this information. It's almost overwhelming.
Almost.
I know more about insurance than I did 2 hours ago, I guess.
Yeah,
We all know it's more than almost overwhelming. It's overwhelming, even for those of us who do this every day.
Right.
Go through and talk to each other and stuff like that. And I would point out, if you decided to stay with the pool, but you wanted to work with a local agent, we do work with local agents. We work with Rick Long in Huron, with some members and stuff like that. We work with Roger Smith in Yankton. We have agents across the state. You have that option. If you wanted to engage an agent, you would just determine what commission structure you wanted to engage him or her on, and then we would work through how that is set up. So we do have that option if the agency relationship is something you want to do. It's not required. You can come directly to us, and there are some fantastic agent opportunities out there. So you could stay with the pool and still have your local agent and still engage those services that they have to offer.
And what the cost.
Okay,
is.
well, I was gonna say, first of all, how does that work? I mean, talk to me with,
So if you decided that you.
You wanna
if-
wanna
come
get
up?
up?
Oh, yes.
That way everybody at home can hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so everybody, okay. So if, for example, we have some members who they want to engage with local counsel and they want us, or local agent, and so they work out a commission structure. So they'll pay, some of them pay a flat fee, some of them pay a percentage of what the total contribution is, and then we collect that amount from you, and then we disperse it back out to them. So it's a pass-through. And then you basically have engaged them to assist you with those types of, valuation reviews and things like that. And then when we go out to do our property surveys and stuff, then we bring them back in the loop and say, okay, here's where we're at, here's the information we have, and we share that with everybody. We do have several agents across the state that we work pretty closely with.
So is that an additional cost?
Yep,
Is
it's
that what it
whatever
is?
you determine that you work out with them. Like I said, some do just a fee base where it's a certain percentage, and then that's just an addition to your current contribution amount. And some of them say, nope, we're gonna pay a flat fee, and it's whatever you've worked out with your agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
thank you. Any other questions? Comments, clarifications? Anything we're not? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prevent a situation 10, 15 minutes after we get home. Why didn't I ask that? Why
Well, and I think we have numbers for you and for you, so we could
You
write
will
those
get
questions down.
questions, I promise you that.
Yeah,
If you don't have Joe's number, I can get it.
I got it.
And she's
And I've
got, gave
got-
us a card, it
yeah,
gave us
Lynn.
all your
Yes.
information.
So you have my card, and our information is on our website. So yes, thank you for giving us this opportunity to both come in and talk with you guys. I know it's not always a thankful job that you guys get, but we appreciate all that you do for your communities.
Well, I just personally like to thank both entities.
Absolutely.
It's a huge responsibility on our behalf to make sure our community is covered and covered well. Anybody who's been a part of a major situation that need to be covered, it's a good feeling that you've got people on your side with regard to help you get through that. And, I know, being part of the school with regard to what we went through, it's reassuring anyway. But and all the insurance companies in their own respect do their part with regard to what needs to be done and stuff. So, but I thank you for your time.
I'd like to make a motion that we make an agenda item for the next regular meeting to revisit the insurance
Okay.
decision.
Second that motion.
Second?
Let's
Yeah.
to vote on it right now and then, or I guess it doesn't have to be specific, but
Well,
it has to be either the next meeting or the following meeting
Yeah.
to make the deadline.
okay.
I
All
don't
right.
wanna say,
I would say the next meeting, just in case something else comes up.
Okay,
Well, it gives everybody a week to review all the information we have.
Right.
Yep.
That we have open lines of communication with both entities.
and then we still have another meeting following that.
Yep.
Cause
If there's absolutely
If there's
something we
something.
can't
Yeah.
figure out,
Cause that'd be the July 3rd meeting.
right.
So.
The water tower falls on City Hall.
That seems to be the general consensus. I don't think I like that.
I wanna go home now.
you know,
Right? You're gonna drive around, you'd better drive around the thing.
It's a brand new water.
so Dan, I'm gonna tell you this. It's been kind of a long, drawn out last few days. If I wake up in the middle of the night with regard to nightmare on the water tower, I'm calling you right now.
Well, it's fine, it's a wind policy and then it's gonna have to be flood policy
Okay.
for City Hall.
All right.
Right.
We have a motion and a second, and had some discussion, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same, motion carries. Okay,
Move we adjourn.
Second.
discussion, we're done. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, I was just gonna say,
Okay.
is it next meeting
Okay,
on the
we're done.
Tuesday?
Aye.
Now we're done.
Okay.
Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you guys will come up with questions, so if you got them,
Yeah, well, we've got your guys, and we appreciate
We may
that.
not need blankets, we might need
And
quilts.
write your
something's
more
going on.
notepads
I don't know
and
what
stuff,
that is.
so you can share those.
Thank you guys for coming all.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Here you go.
What?
Steve, your name was, when he said Steve Lincoln.
She must have escaped, see if she'd get back to